turn it down, it won't do any good. So I wish I could tell my kids that, but they keep turning the air down these days. And it's a good thing that the air conditioning price is going down, right? Ha, ha. Yeah, no such luck. Christian, work going okay? I saw that. You caused that, I heard. Yeah. So you did cause it. Okay. Now we know who to blame. Yeah, I was sitting in my office at about 4 o'clock today, 4:15, and power went out. What was interesting about it was, the air conditioner goes off and all of the dust settles down, and all of a sudden everybody in my room started sneezing. All that dust kind of gets in the air, You don't realize how much this stuff keeps the air circulated and the dust flowing in certain ways. So, never know. All right, so you ever been in a difficult situation in your life where you didn't know what to do? Well, that's where we find Esther in this story. Esther. Well, hey, there he is. We just prayed for him. The Lord provided. How's your neck feeling? Good. You mean to work on it later? Okay, yeah. Do what I can. Grateful to see you, John. Esther is a story that begins, you remember, in the court of Ahasuerus or Xerxes in kingdom of Persia, in Susa. And you remember how powerful he was, how he had this party that showed his decadence, his strength, and his poor judgment. And you remember when Ahasuerus discovered that Vashti would refuse to come to him? Do you remember the emotion that he expressed there in chapter 1? Look back over there in verse 12, chapter 1, verse 12. When Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs, at this time the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him, right? So you have here a kingdom ruled by a ruler who is angry, right? And you remember that when she doesn't come, he gets the advice that he should send out messengers throughout all the country and tell the families that the husband's in charge, the wife must do what he says. And then in chapter 2, after he has been on a battle against the Greeks, he comes back and he remembers the decision against Vashti, and he gets advice that they should send out messengers into all the country, into all the kingdom of Persia, approximately 50 million people, and they should gather from those 25 million or so women a set of beautiful women who could potentially be the king's wife. They created a harem, you remember, in chapter 2. So the idea here is that this king continues to make bad decisions. He's pursuing his own pleasure, his own power. And one of the people who gets caught up in this effort, it's working. Is it not showing up online?
She said it's hard to hear.
All right, I'll move it up closer. And I will speak louder and more distinctly. No. Better? Okay, better. Okay. If I hung it on my nose, I bet it could get there. You remember that one of the people that get caught up in this effort of the king to get a harem is a Jewish woman named Esther. And what characterized Esther? What is she known for, this star of Persia? Her beauty. You remember it was really emphasized in chapter 2, verse 7, that she was lovely to look at, right? She had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And so I don't know what that meant back in that day, but she was desired by men. And she had a cousin whose name was Mordecai. And you remember that Mordecai adopted her and cared for her. And when she gets caught up into the king's palace, he is there walking in front of the court of the harem. He's a soldier in the king's army, we learn. And so these women beautify themselves. There he is, Kobe. Welcome. They beautify themselves for a whole year. And when in verse 15 of chapter 2, we read that when it came Esther's turn, she went in and she won favor in front of everybody's eyes. And the king wasn't angry with her like he was with Vashti. What was his attitude towards Esther? Remember the king Ahasuerus. What did he feel towards her? We read in verse 17 of chapter 2 that the king loved Esther more than all the women. She won grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And so he gives remission of taxes to all the people in celebration of this. And at the end of the chapter, you remember we learned about this plot that is planned against the king by two of his servants. We read about that in chapter 2, verses 19 down through 23. And this sets the stage for chapter 3, which we're going to focus on tonight. You remember that in the king's court there were these two guys, Bigthan and Teresh, who served in his court, and they became angry, we don't know why, and sought to kill King Ahasuerus. It was a big deal. And so this comes to the knowledge of the cousin of Esther, Mordecai, who we've been introduced. And he tells the queen of this plot, and she tells the king and lets him know that Mordecai has done this. And so it's known, and what happens to the two traitors? Notably, they're hung on the gallows. These gallows will appear a few times in this book. And it was recorded in the book, in the Chronicles, in the presence of the king. It was told in the book, it was written down, that Mordecai had saved the king by reporting this plot against him. Okay. Now, does the king do anything to reward Mordecai for this? Evidently, he knows that it was Mordecai, right? It seems, she says he told the king in the name of Mordecai, and it's recorded, but you read through chapter 3 immediately following, is there any appreciation for this? No, there's no appreciation. And think about that. What does that mean? When we do things that are helpful to other people, we do the right thing, will we always be rewarded and appreciated for that? Well, yeah, you don't have to jump at me so soon. You know that's not the case. What's the phrase? No good deed goes on. Oftentimes we end up being punished for our good deed, And so there's this recognition in this world, there is not justice. There's not justice. The just thing, Mordecai saves the king, you'd think he would reward him in some way. John, yeah.
And the flip side is maybe not wanting to do the right thing because you're not here.
Yes, you don't want to do the right thing.
The temptation to not do the right thing.
Exactly. You don't, because not only might you get punished, you don't get recognition for it. And so why should I bother? As Christians, do we do the right thing because we think we're going to be rewarded in this life? No. You know the old story about, and it's true, about the experiment they did about deferred gratification. The idea is that you go, the psychologists did a study with children, and they said, hey, look, they put a marshmallow in the room with the children. And they said, if you don't eat this marshmallow for a period of time, say, 10 minutes, I'll give you 2 marshmallows if you can wait, right? And so the kids. And do you think some of the kids were able to? Do you think some of the kids ate the 1 marshmallow that was sitting in front of them for 10 minutes? Absolutely. Significant number of the kids ate that first marshmallow, knowing that they were going to get, they were going to get rewarded. And some of the kids had the patience, the fortitude to wait around, and they got the 2 marshmallows. Well, they tracked these kids in the course of their life. And which set of kids do you think did better by worldly standards in terms of their success, their ability to have made a living in life, to have a family, and that sort of thing? The ones that could delay gratifications, or the one that couldn't? Well, you guessed it. You're rewarded in this life, generally speaking, if you can delay gratification, right? And let's say, Christian, I'm going to say the most important, I know you got to go to the bathroom, but I'm going to say the most important thing you've ever heard in about 5 minutes, okay? You got to go to the bathroom? I'm going to make you go to the bathroom, So the question is can Christian wait, and hear my words? And the person who can wait and hear the wisdom that John's going to give you, they're going to get wise. But the person who can't, who needs immediate gratification of the relief, they're going to go. And the point is those people who can wait around, they get the wisdom, they get the money, they get the job, they get the family, because they know that if good things come to those who, see, I'm full of Proverbs tonight, see? So we know that. And how is that connected to this? The idea here is that in this life, as Christians, we do the right thing, not because we think we're going to be rewarded right away, because we know what? That the peacemakers, those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, right? Those who are persecuted for God's sake, what are they in the end? Jesus says in Matthew 5, they're blessed, right? They're blessed, they're happy. Not in some worldly sense necessarily, but in the sense that God's pleased with them and God will reward them in the end. So if I tell Alan, hey Alan, I got a gig, I know down the store down there the cash register is never guarded, and I guarantee if I go in and distract the person, we'll be able to get out of there $500 no problem, right? Could you use $500 right now? Yes. Absolutely, And you think, hey, that's a sure deal. I mean, you're not going to get arrested, I guarantee it, right? So no penalty. And you got to ask, should I do it? Well, why wouldn't you do it? You're not going to get arrested. You're going to get away with $500. You could use that, right? Right about now, school's starting. And the reason is that we know that God is watching us, and we have a conscience, and we know what's good and right. And so we're not going to do that. We're going to delay our gratification towards God's reward for living a righteous life. That's directly connected to what we're seeing here. Mordecai does the right thing, not because he thinks he's going to be rewarded, because he knows it's the right thing to do. He knows that God wanted to do. Is that hard to do sometimes? Absolutely. Now, flip it to John's point. We're going to do the right thing, even if it costs us, or we're not going to get a reward, knowing that God will be pleased with us. Yes?
Reminds me of what it says in Proverbs 13, verse 12. It says, delayed hope makes one sick at heart, but fulfilled longing is a tree of life. Yeah. So
Proverbs 13:12, the idea is that if you can delay and defer, that brings life. That brings hope and joy. That's just so true. And so Mordecai here experiences something that we often know, that good deeds oftentimes don't get recognized, and we don't do it for recognition. In fact, I'll tell you a key to leadership as a Christian, whether you're a mother in the home or a husband or a businessman, the more that you can do good things and not call attention to yourself and not expect reward, the happier you'll be. You just kind of don't expect it, and you do it for the sake of doing it, not because you think you're going to get any reward. And that does two things. Number one, you're not disappointed. You don't expect reward for what you're doing. And number two, what you'll find is that when people see you not calling attention to yourself and not trying to glorify you, those of good conscience, of good heart, they'll respect you more, because they see, hey, he's doing it or she's doing it for a more noble reason, right? And that's a good habit to get into. You don't do it for the reward. You do it because it's the right thing. So Mordecai does this right thing. And then we have the opposite of Mordecai, the anti-hero, the antithesis of Mordecai, who is Haman. Okay, and we learn all about Haman in chapter 3. And so let's get into him and let's see what he does. And what we're going to see is that Haman does a really bad thing. And you can already see the moral of this story, right? Good things don't get rewarded. Oftentimes, bad things do get rewarded. Okay, and that's just the world we live in. The sooner we realize that, the better off we'll be. So let's read Esther chapter 3, verses 1 through 6, and learn about this Mordecai and where he comes from and what he seeks to do learn about this Haman and learn where he comes from and what he seeks to do. Notice it says in chapter 3, verse 1, that Haman is an Agagite. Sounds like a rock. What's that rock made out of? It's an Agagite, right? Like a stalactite or something like that. But Agagite means that he is from the land of Canaan. What do we know about the Canaanites? Like Goliath of Gath. Were the Canaanites God's people? No. Canaanites are the great enemies of God's people. It'd be like saying, hey, there's a guy out in the audience back out there. I mean, in the foyer back there, and guess what? He has a coat that has the mark of the North Korean army on it, right? You might kind of get your attention up, or the Russian army on it. Well, you pick your geopolitical enemy of the United States, right? And you'd be like, ooh, that's a bad guy, okay? Or what would you say? He's a Nazi back there, right? Or a skinhead back there. Any of those things you want to be identified? Lim, you're such a good Nazi. Kim, you are the smoothest skinhead I've ever known. You say, no, don't even say that, because I don't want people to get the wrong idea, right? But to name someone something like that brands them as a bad dude or a bad gal. Well, if you call Haman an Agagite, we don't pick up on that, but that's that idea. The Israelites hated the Philistines, because they were constantly, you go back in the book of Judges in particular, all of those Canaanites, those are the ones that worship false gods and were always battling with Gideon and others back in the day, right, trying to defeat them. So that's who we're dealing with. Let's read here chapter 3, verse 1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, he would not listen to them. And they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury, anger. We've seen that before with Ahasuerus. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. All right, Haman, not a good man. His name tells us something about him, but what does he want? He wants glory, he wants honor, he wants power. So he's kind of a mini Ahasuerus. We've seen Ahasuerus' drive for power, right? But what makes this worse is he gets angry at Mordecai, and rather than going out and killing Mordecai, the nature of this guy is, I'm going to take this out on who? Mordecai's entire people. Okay? And so you see this kind of projection, this blame shifting. He says, I'm going to take what this man has done to me. And probably, he doesn't say this, probably because of the history of our peoples. Remember what I just told you? He says, I'm going to punish not only Mordecai, but all of his people. What may have been millions of people, I'm going to kill all of them. Okay, remember a few sessions ago we talked about the problem. The question is okay, will the Israelites live through this threat? Will they be able to survive? Because if they can't, then there's a good chance that the promise to God made back in Genesis 3 won't come true. That the man would bruise the head of the serpent, and that men would be able to overcome the power of Satan. That's at stake in this. And God's promise through Abraham that in his seed all the people of the world would be blessed. Is that going to happen? Because this is the seed of Abraham. This is the question. I tell you, this is the question. Are they going to survive? Okay? So that's what the stakes are in this. Now, let's read. It's an important kind of setting of the stage. All this builds, we got 9 chapters, so we're going to build towards. And we learn a very important fact about what happens during this regency, this rulership of Haman here, in verses 7 down through 11. Let's read 7 through 11. And my question is why do we learn the name of the dice that they cast lots with? You know what casting lots is? What is casting lots? We don't use that language today. What do we call casting lots? Huh? Yeah, dice. Rolling the die. So whether it was a dice or bones to see which side it would come up on, right? Do they roll the dice in Africa? Do they play games with dice or that sort of thing? And why do you roll the dice? What's what different reasons for that? Why do you roll the dice? Yeah. Yeah, it's a chance to win. So maybe a game. So hey, what are the dice going to say? It's going to be an odds number, it's flipping a coin sort of thing. And so, you win or lose based upon what the die, by chance. In theory, it's just even odds, say, right? Yeah. Yeah. You do want to play, you like to play that? Okay. Yeah. So we're familiar with this idea of rolling the dice. And so why else do you roll die? Why else do you cast lots? Well, it's kind of like drawing straws, right? You know, okay, who's going to be the one that... I went to the bathroom back there, Kevin, and I tell you what, someone made a real mess. I don't know why I'm talking about the bathrooms. I went back here to the baptistry, and someone didn't clean the baptistry. And hey, you or I are going to have to clean it. It's going to take an hour, right? So hey, I've got a dice here. You know, odd you do it, even I do it. Sound good? All right, we roll it, and so you roll die to make a selection, drawing straws, that sort of thing. Well, that's what they did, and not only that, they would roll dice in order to see what the gods wanted them to do, right? So there would be different reasons, you know, augury they'd call it, you know, determining what does God want us to come to church Sunday? Well, rather than read the scriptures, let's just roll some dice and see, right? And so we do that. Oftentimes, you know, stock pickers will just kind of randomly, or, you know, you go, I know that Latasha goes down, she tells me all the time how she goes down and bets on the horses down here in Tampa. And so, you know, she goes down there and she has to choose a horse that she's going to win. And what do you do, Latasha? You were telling me you just go down there and roll the die, and whichever number comes up, you bet on that horse, right? And so y'all learn a lot about Latasha tonight. So I am kidding, for the record. But the thing is she would just kind of choose her horse based upon that. And that's what they would do in the ancient world. They'd roll. Okay, so all this is prelude to what we read in verse 7. So let's read here. In the first month, chapter 3, verse 7, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast Pur, P-U-R, that is, they cast lots before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman, so we're going to ask why. Why is that? Why are they casting lots? Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people, so this royal figure, Haman now, remember he has a lot of power, goes to the king. And he says, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be decreed that if they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents. Okay, so you know a talent is like 70 pounds, 75 pounds. So a lot of money. Imagine just coming in on the carts. I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasury. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also to do with them as seems good to you. Okay. So Haman's plot's unfolded. He's got approval to kill the Jews. And let's just notice three things about Haman's action. How did he determine when he would go before the king and make this request? It had been days after he had decided that he was going to go to the king. How did he determine what day he was going to go to the king? Anybody know? Yeah. They were casting lots. Okay, it would seem that's the decision. So the question is, you know, it says that the men of Haman, they were doing this day after day until the 12th month. And so the question was what? Is today the day we go ask the king? Roll the die. Okay? Is today the day we go after the king? Go ask the king. Roll the die. And so the implication is it took months before the die came up snake eyes, and they said, this is the month. So the idea is that they're putting it to chance, when will we go to the king? And that determines when the Jews will be destroyed. Okay, so keep that in mind, because the day that is going to be set for the Jewish destruction, the destruction of the Jews, is set by these die, by this casting of lots. Okay? Why that becomes important, I'm going to tell you some at the end of the story. I'm not going to give too much away. Maybe you've already read it. At the end of the story, there's a very important day when the Jews were supposed to be killed, And God, as we're going to see, turns the tables on the enemies of the Jews. This is a story of reversal. Remember God's providence. So he's not mentioned in the book. We see he's in control. Okay? That day that the Jews are delivered from their enemies in Persia is named at the end of this book, and it's named forever after. And even Jesus observes this day during his lifetime as a festival of the Jews when they celebrate this deliverance from the king of Persia. They name that day. Anybody know what's that day called? The feast, the day of Purim. Oh, wait, where have we seen that name before? What do they call the lots, the dice, or whatever they are, the bones that they cast? Purim. Okay, now just notice what's going on here. Any Jew reading this book would know that story already. Okay, and so the point is that Haman puts it into the hands of chance. When will I try to kill the Jews? And what we've already heard is that God's not going to allow the Jews to be destroyed. And on the day of their deliverance, that's going to be called the day of dice, the day of lots. So here's the point. Looking ahead, that which people think is chance, rolling of the die, God will show to be what? His plan, his purpose. So, we say, there was a day that Lem met Kathy. Lem, do you remember that day when you met Kathy? Yeah, remember that. Were you planning on meeting Kathy that day? No? And so you probably walked away and says, boy, I was sure am lucky that I met Kathy that day. Right? We say that all the time. That was lucky. That was fortunate. We say those things. Fortune is the Latin god, the Roman god of chance. Right? Luck, gets back to the Greek word for the god of luck, of chance. Right? Is anything in this life good that happens to us just luck or chance? No. It's part of God's plan. It's part of his purpose for us. And so this book is saying, hey, what we think is just probability. I was lucky that I met her. That's God's providence, right? Purim. At the root of it is this idea of casting lots, okay? So built into this book is God saying, I know you don't see me, but I'm beneath you the whole time. I'm watching, I'm controlling things. And so imagine that. Day after day, the dice didn't come up that this is the day. Who was making that dice? You ever seen a die that lands on its side and then it could go either way? It's right there. It could go one or six, Every time they said, okay, if it comes up one, we're going to go talk to the king. And for months, that dice came up 6. Who made that dice come up 6? God did. Okay? And in your and my life, he's always making it come up 6 in the way that's according to his plan. You see that? And so you see how this book, there's kind of these messages beneath to say, realize the fabric of providence that's beneath the texture of our life, that God's holding us up, he's protecting. Questions? That make sense? You see what's going on there. Okay, second thing about these verses. Number 1, God's providence, not just probability. 2, notice here, is Haman honest with the king? Is he honest with the king about this situation? He talks about these Jews. What does he say about them? Those scoundrel Jews, when it comes to your laws and what you want, they're completely opposed to you, right? They don't obey your law. Well, what just happened in the previous chapter? Who saved the hide of the king? The Jew Mordecai. Does he care about the laws? Does he care about people, not getting murdered and the king being alive? Yes. Is this a true statement that the Jews don't care about laws? They don't care about you? They're trying to overthrow your kingdom? No. He lies. He just outright lies. You ever had anybody lie? Just bold-faced lie about you? In order to kind of have something, happen towards you that's bad? That's what happens here to the Jews and to Mordecai. They just lie. And so as Christians, we should expect, I'm sad to say, that the individuals who just lie about us. That group over there, they think that they're better than everybody else. They think they're the only people going to heaven. Is that what you believe? No. No, we don't put ourselves in the place of God on that. And we certainly have love and compassion for everybody. And it's true of Christians today as it was of the Jews of old, that people misrepresent them. And then finally, what's this deal about 10,000 talents? So Haman comes to the king and says, hey, if you let this happen, if you let me kill all the Jews, what am I going to put into your treasury? All of this money. What do we call that? If I say, John, if you will go over there and flick, a Christian's ear, I mean, not just a little tap, I mean one that you go over there and flick his ear to where, I mean, it's almost bleeding, it's so red, okay? I'll give you $10, right? Pay for your big gulp on the way home, right? And what do we call that when we use money to coerce or to convince somebody to do something? What's the name for that? A bribe. So Mordecai not only, rolls the dice, not only lies about it, but he bribes the king. And of course the king, we've already learned about his character, he's not an upstanding figure. What does he say? Okay, sure. But what do I got to lose, right? And so here's one lesson from this. We saw that with Mordecai, do the good get rewarded in this life? Not always. With Haman, what do we find out? Bad dude, lying, gambling, bribing. Does he get what he wants? Yeah, he gets rewarded for it. And so Esther is teaching us a lesson about the nature of our world, that especially in the beginning of things, the good guys lose and the bad guys win. And there's a lot of psalms about that, right? Where David and other psalmists say, God, why? Why do the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer? Right? And I have a lot of questions about that, don't you? That's the problem of evil in the world. Why does evil happen, and why does evil seem so often to come out ahead? You ever wonder about that? Well, I do, right? And it happens in a host of ways, in our workplace, in our family, in our community, and so that's what's being described here. Okay? So the book of Esther is getting to some big questions in life. Let's look how this finishes, and we see how they deploy this order that the king has made. Okay, let's read here in chapter 3, verses 12 through 15. You with me? Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, this announcement, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps, his rulers out in the provinces, and the governors over the provinces, and to the officials of all the people. To every province in its own script, it was written in the name of the king of Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring that marked it as his order. Letters were sent out by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day. And this was what was being determined here by the casting of lots and when he was able to go before the king. And that day, we read here, is the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods, take all their possessions. Verse 14, a copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. And so the couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa the citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Well, I hate to leave at such a dark moment in the history of the Jews, but that's where the chapter ends. And let's think about this. So if you look at the situation, if you're a Jew, what is it looking like? Not good. The king's ring is on an order that says you and your wife and all your family is going to die. And not only that, we're going to take all your possessions and bring it back to the king. Right? And so that's a dark situation. And I wonder, have you ever been in a situation like that, where you just look what's happening, you're like, there's just no hope. Everything's stacked against me, right? I know a guy right now, nobody here, who he's 36, and he's trying to find a mate in life. And he's been going and asking girls out. And he's a good-looking guy, got a career, and he just keeps getting turned down. I even asked him, what lines are you using, man? Kind of sort of thing. And he's sweet about it, and some of the girls are sweet toward him. But he just keeps getting turned down. And you go out on a date and just doesn't go. But you know, you can imagine what his spirit is like right now. I was talking to him the other day at an event, and I'm giving up hope. Maybe this is just he really wants to get married. And maybe this is just my lot in life. And so he's kind of like the Jews here in the sense that everything seems to be working against him. He can't. And I don't make light of that situation. It's a serious situation where someone's greatest hopes, and he's wanting this for altruistic reasons. He wants to have a family, be able to be happy and be of service in the world. He feels like he has a lot to offer a woman, and he can't have it, seemingly. What does that make you feel like? Worthless, helpless, hopeless, right? And so there's that situation. I deal with a lot of people, young people especially, who are looking for a job. All they want to do is make some money and be able to pay for a car or be able to buy an apartment or that sort of thing. And I don't know if you've noticed lately, but it's, especially for young people getting a start in this life, is it necessarily easy to find a job? A lot of reasons for that we could talk about, but I'm not going to get political for you here in a moment. But I mean, you can imagine, I've gone to so many interviews, right? Help wanted hanging in the window, and I just get shown the door. I'm not old enough. I'm not the right fit. I don't have the right clothes or the right look, or I don't have the right skill or whatever it is. Answer after answer. I was talking to a young man the other day. He says, I have looked all summer for a job. And he's about to go back to school, and he just gives up, right? And there are more serious situations too. Talking to a woman the other day, her husband is repeatedly unfaithful to her. And all she wants to do is just to be able to have a loving family. But he just continues to cheat on her. That's more serious now, isn't it? And so what is a woman to do in that situation? She wants to be able to, have a family. She loves the man still, despite his infidelity. But there's no sign that he's going to give up on that, even though he keeps coming back to her and apologizing. He keeps going back to her. Those are serious situations, hopeless, right? And that's where the Jews are right here. You could expand these situations. Health situations. Doctors tell you things. You're trying to do your job, and colleagues are just making it impossible on you, right? Or you're trying to fix your house, get ahead. Things just keep breaking. You name it. Small things in our life. You're trying to spread the gospel, and people say they'll come or they're interested in studies, but just doesn't seem to get anywhere after multiple efforts. I'm depressed. Lynn, you take over the class. I can't go on. This is our life. Everybody's got this moment where the decree seems to have been stated. A woman's trying to recover from a disease which has bothered her for years, and she should have been able to get over it, but can't get over it. And it just seems like it continues to drain her, and despite her best efforts, she works day after day after day to get better health, and doesn't come, right? So why am I going down this road? I think Esther chapter 3 is meant to bring us to kind of the proverbial bottom of the well. You're down at the well, you're at the bottom, and you're looking up. You see the light, but the light's just teasing you because you can't get to it. There's no way to get out of there. And you're taking on water, and it just seems like you're without hope. We have to feel the reality of our life. We oftentimes block it out. We don't want to think about it. But that's oftentimes the case. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to see in chapter 4 that all of a sudden you're in the middle of that water in that well, and it's come up, and it's touched here, and you're like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. And you know what happens, though, that if you hold your breath, what happens when the water starts to rise in a well? What goes up? Huh? You rise too, right? The very depth of the situation God uses to be able to lift you up, right? If you just breathe in and, hope for life, right? You could always just put your head under the water and drown. But if you have hope, if you have resolve, if you have trust that you can get out of this, what happens? It may take a little while, but what happens? You get out. I won't charge you extra for the trick of getting out of a well, okay? But just swim your way out, right? Just buoy your way out. So what we're going to see in chapter 4 is that the tide starts to, mix up my metaphors, the water starts to rise. right? The water starts to rise. But you have to see, what's the thing, when is it darkest in the night? What's that proverb? It's all, the night, what's that? The night is always darkest right before the dawn, right? I don't know how, I don't know. I think the idea that you've gone so long with darkness, you know, that you're at the moment where you least believe that light's going to come. And then there it peaks over the corner, right? So in all of those situations I mentioned, you know, finding a wife, finding a job, finding good health, being able to get over the situation with your colleagues, that sort of thing. The book of Esther is saying, hey, you know what? Your situation is not left to chance. Remember the poor? What people think is chance, that's God working in your life. And if you have hope and have faith. And what we're going to see in chapter 4 is that Esther will begin to realize how she can save her people. And it's going to take some encouragement. But this book is a story of, okay, hey, we're lifting up. There's hope. And God is using the very situation that we find ourselves in order to accomplish his purpose. Remember, you're in the well. What's the problem? You're about to drown. And the thing that will drown you is the very thing that if you have hope in God, he will use to lift you up, right? You know, that man who couldn't find a wife, when he finds that wife, because of what he has gone through to find her, do you think he's going to cherish her and hold on to her and appreciate her all the more? Absolutely, right? Right? And so that young man who's tried to find a job, he knows what it takes to find a job. When he does find a job, you better believe he's going to put all his effort in that because he appreciates that opportunity all the more, as opposed to the guy who just got the first job and fritters it away and never really learns a good work ethic. You go down the road, the woman who, you know, has been able to get recovery from her disease, when she uses that, if she has the right attitude about it, she's not going to take her life and say, well, I'm so grateful that I'm better, I'm just going to spend it on myself. What she should be is what? Grateful to the God who healed her and uses her life to good purposes beyond what she would have done if she hadn't had that disease. You see how that works? That's how it should work. You go on and on and on. And I'm just going to tell you, you may not be able to see it, but Esther is teaching us that that is the lesson, that God uses our weakness to show his strength in us and to make us stronger because of the trials. What does James say? We just studied James. He says what? Brethren, if you find yourself in a trial, right, what should we count it? What should we think about that trial? Consider it all joy. The idea is that trials, when they come to us, is the very moment where you say, okay, God's at work in this. What's he going to do through this? What's he going to do through this, right? I'll give you another example. You know, there's a book out there called The Hiding Place. Anybody read The Hiding Place by chance? It's a book written, I gave you an example of this in the sermon. Yeah. You read it? Yeah, at school. They make you read that, even though it's an old book. And it's about World War II. Remember the example I used in my sermon this past Sunday of the woman who hid the Jews in her house? It's that story. And, you know, all of her family dies in concentration or internment camps because they hid the Jews. And what she does is she gets out the last minute, she survives. And because of that experience, she gives her life to missionary work around the world. Writing that story, telling that story, and here I am on August 13th, 2025, repeating that story. And would I be doing that if her family had not gone through the hellscape that was the Nazi regime? No. You see that? And so God uses those things in life to magnify him and to lift us up, right? And I tell you, if you don't believe me, it's because the water hasn't quite risen enough to where you're lifting up out of it. You know? And that's just the case. God uses it. If we're faithful to him, despite our doubts, if we're faithful to him and we trust in him, we don't leave him, we pray to him, we work for him, we serve him, he'll lift us up. Okay, that's my sermon for the night. No. But you see how that comes from Esther, right? And so I know that many of us are in a dark place, different places. But let this be, even having not read the rest of the story, knowing how it ends on the day of Purim, know that things which everybody else says is chance, it's not chance. God's providence is in our life, and if we do not let go of him, if we hold on to him, he'll lift us up, if not in this life, then in the end. All right? So, okay, I'm going to leave you there at the bottom of the well, but what do you know is coming? elevation, right? It's coming, so take hope in that. And we'll get into that in chapter 4. So we got about 5 minutes, but because I'm a gracious teacher and I care for your time, I'm going to let us go early tonight, okay? So, any other comments about this before we conclude? All right. High school students are, yes, we can go to bed early, right? Okay. All right. Let's say a word of prayer, and then we'll dismiss, okay? God, we are so grateful that you are the God of darkness and of light, and that even in our darkest moment, submerged by the concerns, the cares, the persecutions, the pains, the frets of this life, we know, God, that you're with us. And we know your presence because you have promised that in Jesus and our faith in him, we know you. And we know that Jesus is your image. And we see in him who is able to go to the Gethsemane, even facing the most horrific death, and pray, not my will, but thine be done. And like him, we wish that this cup that we have in our life, this circumstance, could pass from us. But we pray to you, not our will, but your will be done, knowing that you have promised that in this life you'll lift us up, and in the end you'll raise us to be with you on that day in which you judge us as your faithful servant. God, we pray that we will be faithful, and that you will increase our faith, and that you will give us hope for better things that you would want for us. God, we are your servants, and that means that we trust in what you give to us, and we only want to please you. And we thank you for this story about Haman and Mordecai and the hatred that this man felt toward the Jews, because we sometimes feel that ourselves. We're under such pressure, oh God, and so we draw near to you like an infant draws near to its mother's breast. And we pray that you'll hold us close and protect us and comfort us. Give us strength and courage in the challenges that we face. And we pray that you'll defeat our enemies, and that we might, God, overcome the challenges, the persecution, and the suffering that is in our life. Thank you for this story of Esther and the hope that it brings. Bless us on the way home. Keep us safe and bring us back, we pray in Christ's name. Amen. What a blessing to be with you all tonight. Good to see you. Hope that you find joy in this night. Good to be with you.